Hey everybody, welcome to this mini lecture on the 5 healing lenses at LIATI. So at LIATI, we really specialize in inner mothering work, inner child healing, and basically somatic trauma release so that we can live authentically in alignment with our true self, our authentic self, and our core values that we choose to have in our life. So when we go through the LIATI system, we have 5 different lenses that we kind of explore this idea of trauma through. So today we're going to go through a short little video about what types of lenses we use in our system. All right, so understanding wounding and recovery from the LIATI method. Right, the first way we'd look at trauma or wounding is from a neurological lens. So this is a classic, trauma lens that we look through. And we kind of look at this through survival energy. So sympathetic versus parasympathetic neurological activity. So what happens when we experience something that's too much for our brain, our body to handle? What do we end up doing? Okay, usually we'll do a few things. We will fight, okay, which is we will actually fight for our survival. That huge surge of survival energy will kick up and we will literally be fighting for our lives, okay? We will flight, which means we will leave. We will try to get the heck out of there any way we can. So when we look at those two systems of survival or defending, we know here that there's a lot of neurological energy that gets charged up in the body, okay, in order to do these two things, all right? If we can't get away and we can't fight, what we tend to do is the body will have so much sympathetic energy that it will say, you know what, that's too much, you're going to cook, or you can't get away from this trauma. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn you down like a light switch, like a dimmer, so that you don't feel what's happening, which is a really lovely thing our body does. Okay, so we call that the freeze response or a dorsal vagal shutdown. And when that happens to us and we don't then go in and complete the flight response or the cycle back into a neutral zone, that freeze response can get very stuck in our body. And along with that freeze comes that very high charge of energy as well. So this is a classic thing that happens to people when they're living in a functional freeze later in life, that they feel really, really anxious and really, they feel that fight flight energy that's stuck in the body, but then they are also depressed and hypoactive and lethargic because that freeze response, that part of the brain that shut them down has still not realized that the threat is over. So they're kind of fighting their own neurology, right? So I don't know if that feels like anything that happens to you, but it's pretty common, especially with very high functioning, hypervigilant, goal setting people. So living in this freeze response, this fight flight response. All right, the next thing we might do is fawn. And this is more common for children, okay? But fawning is when we people please, when we kind of push ourselves away and we'll do whatever is needed for the family dynamic to be safe and mostly calm. So this means that kids might become kind of the mediator for their parents, or be the helper, take away the issues in the family by becoming a pleaser. All right, which means a whole lot of that authentic self is kicked down to the basement, and they are left with this kind of hollow, when everybody else is okay, then I can be connected to myself, then I'll be okay. But what tends to happen with this one is that as we get older in this response, it becomes part of our personality. And we might end up being a little bit maybe codependent or relying on other people for validation, or a lot of things can happen with this fawn response. All right, so we get into these kind of things in LIATI. We talk about this. This is very common stuff, really. Another thing we might do is called feed response. So food addiction, alcohol addiction, any kind of addiction that kind of stuffs things down that were too much to handle. So emotional eating is a big one here. So yeah, if you've ever done that, that's a trauma response. And we definitely get into that in LIATI. Feed response is very close to my heart. I used to do that one quite a bit. So I totally understand how to heal from it. Okay, so then when we are finally healing in the neurological part, what we're doing is turning on that parasympathetic response, which is going to be that rest, digest, heal response. It's going to be the breed response. So it's when your body's receptive. Okay, you can think about the neurological system being either on or off, gas or brakes. And if we're stuck on the opposition all the time, our lives are going to be pretty chaotic. So we have to balance them. And in this work, we look at how are you doing from a neurological perspective? Okay, and we look at breath work for that. We look at a lot of different stuff. right? Our next lens of trauma that we look through or healing is called the shamanic lens. So in shamanism, there's this concept of soul splitting, where we come into the world completely whole, dynamic, and unique as our fractal of intelligence that we're here to be, with our soul contracts, with our life plan in hand. And things happen, right? We inherit ancestral wounding, we come through life, and we experience things that are difficult, that are struggles. So in soul splitting, what we say is that, maybe during something that was too much for us to handle, we kind of slice a part off of ourselves and put it in the metaphoric basement because it doesn't feel safe to keep it near us. That might be, a very strong fear response. That might be a very sad moment. That might be a whole part of your personality that wasn't accepted in your household or in your part of society where you live. So that part kind of gets cut off, fractured off, and put in the subconscious into what we might call the shadow. Okay. So as we get older and we've been slicing parts of ourselves off in order to fit in, to be loved, to belong, which are core human needs, to feel safe, these kinds of things start to kind of fester down there in the basement. Just because we repress something doesn't mean it goes away. Usually it means it can start to get sticky and volatile inside of kind of ferment down there. So what we might come up with is a lot of triggers in our life, might be very, very triggered by a lot of different things. It might be extended responses to something that's not that big a deal. Or with so much of yourself cut off, you're kind of like walking around like a wraith. So there might be that soul sadness that comes in, like, what's wrong? I just can't put my finger on it. But it's a hollow depression mixed with anxiety once again, because of course, right? Of course you're depressed. You're missing most of your soul. And the anxiety comes because when I try to tune into myself, there's nothing there. So it causes a lot of worry, a lot of fear. So that's the soul splitting lens that we look at. And we'll go through this as far as what happened in childhood and what did you do about it? Did you suppress part of yourself? Did you cut parts off? How did you do this soul splitting? And how can we go down to that metaphoric basement and reclaim those parts of ourself? Okay, that's one lens we look through as well. Okay, the quantum energy lens, which is one of my favorites. This has to do with the subtle energetic field that we all live in, the physical body being the densest part of that field. We also have an emotional body, a mental body, many, many spiritual bodies, astral bodies. So as we come into being, we have this vortexes of energy, these chakras that are pulling energy in to keep us healthy. And what happens with this type of trauma lens is that something will happen and that intelligent energy that's pulling the energy into the chakra will start to slow down. It'll become sluggish, or it'll even freeze completely. And when it freezes completely, we no longer have that flow of energy. And so we end up having health problems in some way, which is mental, emotional, or physical health problems, depending on the chakra that is affected. Okay. So, and also something that can happen is, people can have their chakras spinning the wrong direction. And this is classic projection, where let's just say maybe a child was bullied at school and their heart was really hurt by that. They were rejected and that hurt their heart chakra. So eventually their heart chakra starts to spin counterclockwise. And then the whole world that they see is based off of that rejection. So they have this huge trust issue with life in general. And maybe don't trust people, don't trust that they can start new endeavors, don't trust that they can, be in life. And that leads to lots of other problems as well, right? This is just how we look at it. There's many lenses. And in this quantum energetic lens, we know that, our subtle energetics is basically what's voting into the universal grid 100% of the time. So we attract what we are, not what we want. So if we have wounding in our field that's unhealed, we'll probably most likely attract people or experiences that are going to trigger that wounding to get healed. So that might be in relationship. Usually it happens in relationship because intimacy is the classroom. So we will attract a partner or we'll attract relationships that'll trigger us, it'll poke us, that we have to look at our wounding and then heal it. Okay. So in our classes, there is a lot of chakra mechanics, and you'll see here, there's a mini class here. And that's on YouTube. You can definitely check that out. And it has a breath work with it, but it'll basically take you through the front and the back of each chakra and what lives there. And so you can kind of see, where maybe am I lacking, or am I maybe wounded? Do I have low back pain? Do I have problems with abundance there, financial health? The mother line in my family, ancestral wounding from the feminine line there in the lower back, that emotional body of the second chakra. Do I not have much sexual energy? Do I not have much creative energy? This is all living in the back of the second chakra. So we can really get into quantum energetics with healing wounds and really get specific, very specific about what lives where. Okay. What's next? So the next lens we look at is usually the inner child lens. So this inner child lens is a deep one, and there's a whole class at LIATI called the Alchemy of Healing, the full immersion, which will go deep into this. So what we say is, as children, we will put on survival jackets, we'll put on survival techniques that we needed, and we'll go through life thinking that's who we are. And as we get older, we kind of have outgrown this little jacket, but we still use it to survive in the world. But often it causes a lot of issues, and it's usually affecting our mental health at some point. So these survival strategies that we put on as kids come in a format. There might be somebody in your life, or maybe you did this, that you dissociate into spirituality or into analytics because it was too much to handle. So you decided you were going to be the smart person and get lots of degrees or be really metaphysical, but you're really disconnected from your body. Okay. You might have been a helper. You might have been one of those people who mediated in the family, fond, and then you grow up and you want to be a healer yourself, but you find that there's something missing. Okay. You're coming home exhausted, or there's something going on where you feel drained from people instead of fueled by your work. All right. Or you don't feel like a real person unless you're helping somebody. This is a really interesting addiction to help people when it's coming from a place of trauma. That's a childhood strategy of survival that you've probably outgrown. And there's other ways to do it now. The lone wolf structure, right? That's where, you didn't get your needs met as a child. So you said, I'm not going to have any needs and I'll do everything myself. I'll be independent. And so you go through life rejecting help so that you don't feel the pain of being let down. Okay. But more importantly, you reject your own needs. So you're probably not very connected to that self-love system. You might feel like you have a task list to perform, and if you get all that done, then maybe you can put yourself on it. But you're not naturally there. Okay. The endure, this is somebody who had to deal with maybe helicopter parents or overscheduled, and they suppressed their whole authentic nature. Okay. These people might grow up to be master procrastinators, or self-sabotagers, where they might reject authority big time. So they might say, I put myself on programs and I fall off the wagon a lot. And then I put myself back on Monday, and then I fall off the wagon on Wednesday. And there's a lot of this back and forth with this type of child strategy that no longer works. Okay, the performer, of course, look at me, look at me, look at me. We might call this narcissism, but it's actually a trauma symptom. Is this what happened to your inner child? You were always performing for love. So now as an adult, you don't know how to take off that jacket. Okay. Or the rigid structure, which is basically Superwoman, which is, let me pile my list up of everything to be the perfect person, and then I'll get exhausted. And when I finally check everything off my list, I can relax. Okay. So these are lenses that children do. These are childhood strategies. These are not adult strategies. And in LIATI, we try to unpack these so that you can actually get your inner adult, your inner parent in the driver's seat and take care of this poor person that is still trying to drive life because she's still living in fear. Okay, we want the inner adult to drive. We want the higher self to drive, not the child. The child's not supposed to run life. Okay, they're supposed to have fun. They're supposed to be the creative spark within you, not the person running the show. All right, the mud analogy, which is very similar to the child, but I like this analogy because it's very Jungian and metaphoric. So then this analogy is coming from, well, actually it comes from, I believe it comes from Sufism. Ironically, I didn't know that until someone told me that it was in the program and it's Sufi mythology. But the mud analogy is the idea that we all have this beautiful essence within us, like an essential oil, you could say. And every plant has a different essential oil. And you can definitely not mistake jasmine for cedarwood. You know that they're different. Okay, we are all here as different vibrational mixes, as different vibrational souls. And when we come to Earth and we incarnate into these bodies, we are hit with a lot of conditioning and a lot of programming, whether it's going to be cultural or just the human programming in general of having, a closed system, a polarized consciousness. That's a big deal. So what we say here is that essential essence of who we are, the authentic essence, kind of gets covered up with this mud, and this mud becomes hard around us, and we forget that we're this authentic essence. Okay, so we say here that healing is not necessarily, fixing. It's about washing away what's not you. And when you wash that mud away, then you actually reveal who you truly are, your soul path, your soul contracts, and you get to be reconnected to that joy of what you're here to actually do. Okay, joy is the compass. So you're not injured, you're not wounded, you're just covered up. So in this sort of mythology, we say that there is no such thing as a wounded inner child, really, that there is just a covered up inner child. So you can look at it both ways, depending on how your lens wants to go, right? So that's what we do at LIATI. We look at trauma through those lenses. We look at healing through those lenses, and we get to work fixing the vibrational health of your system, reclaiming the inner child, waking up the inner feminine, because that's the part that usually takes care of life on the inner landscape, and then getting the sacred masculine also in the driver's seat to really deal with the outer world and have a balanced psyche so that you can live abundantly in vitality and have so much fun here, really, because this is a fun place to live, vibrationally speaking. So next steps, if you like this type of material, you're going to want to reach out for a discovery call with me, where we'll talk about what might be the best fit for you. You're going to book a session, which will also start with a discovery call. So just book a discovery call. Or you can enroll in one of the LIATI courses. And the main course that we have is called the 5 Pillars. And the 5 Pillars has every class in it. So that's the main big kahuna. And it's on a payment plan. And you can also use that course as kind of a prerequisite if you ever wish to teach this material in your own private practice in our teacher training. Okay. Or if you want to just experience it for yourself and have a good time, you can also just come and retreat with us. We do a goddess retreat every spring, and we'll do several different things throughout the year, micro weekends and such around Colorado and other places. All right. So that's the 4 lenses or 5 lenses of healing through the LIATI system. So I hope that was useful, and have a wonderful afternoon. Hope to speak with you soon. Bye-bye.